All right, so I'm Greg Bull. I'm a technical advisor here at Goujon Brothers. We're going to go back working on our door here. We have some splits at the bottom. It's starting to open up and just hasn't been taken care of real well. So we've got splits in the wood in different areas. We've got a seam that's kind of opening up, and I'm going to show how to go about filling that or getting epoxy in there so maybe we can clamp it all back together and get a nice tight door again. Now, in doing that, I'm going to use one of our syringes with the long needle nose on it. And what I've also fashioned is the long needle nose underneath and just a normal straw, just a drinking straw, so that I can kind of squeeze it, get it down in the crack a little bit more so it'll flow around the joint that's there. I'm going to start off by scraping the surface. I've got a couple different scrapers here that I'm going to use, kind of get all the loose paint and so forth off, and then I'll do a light sand on it to just make it smooth before we start my application. The loose paint on top is scraping up pretty easily. Just kind of clean up my surfaces so I can get epoxy on it. And one thing to look out for as you're doing this, the grain of the wood changed. This is kind of running the length of the door, and then this piece is going across the door. So if you keep going the length of the door on the width of the door grain, you'll probably end up digging some out. So you remember to switch over and scrape the other way so to keep a nice smooth surface. I'm going to clean up along the edge a little bit. My crack so I can get a little bit of epoxy, because I'll probably have a little bit of squeeze out on either side. So that'll be good to clean that up a little bit. It looks like the surface will probably be painted when we're all said and done, and get the majority of it, all the loose stuff off. Then I can back in and do a light sand on the surface to then clean off to be able to do my epoxy work on. And you might have noticed as I was sanding, I kind of filled in my cracks or seams with the sanding dust. So you want to make sure you go back, and I'll use my same scraper and just drag down through that crack just to help clean out any debris in that's in it. If you're doing your other cracks and too, you may do those the best you can, kind of to open them up. Might have to do it a couple times. Not really looking to scrape down in the crack or seam, getting loose debris out of it. Some of my other splits in the wood, the larger areas, kind of get those cleaned out. And just make sure you broom it off good or vacuum it up to get it cleaned out. Seeing I'm just working in a very localized area, I don't think I'll end up sanding a large area. We're going to look at putting a coat of epoxy across the whole bottom, end grain, and then probably come up the side an inch or two just to protect it from water splashes and so forth. Just getting some of the epoxy to squeeze up. You can see some of the air bubbles coming out as I'm doing it. And the straw is just there again to get it down in the crack a little bit. I've got a little bit of a puddle on top that I'll come back and clean up. I'm watching that as I'm squeezing the plunger down on the syringe. I can see the epoxy going in and then bubbling up a little bit behind my straw. So I'm just kind of watching that as I'm going. I'll probably have to come back and squirt a little bit more in as it soaks in, being old dry wood. The middle here, I've seen that it's soaking down in nicely. My end piece is actually soaking in. It's kind of gone over, but it is soaking in this edge of the joint. I can also take a syringe over my stir stick, kind of just work it along the crack or seam, let it soak and work its way down around that seam. Saw the straw, let me do a little bit with just the syringe. Now when I'm working with a syringe, I always put my finger over the nozzle to keep it from just running out. And then when I put the plunger in, I like to tip it back up so the air that was in the top of the syringe comes up. I can kind of work that out. Looks like I got a little bit of squeeze out here. Yep, there we go. So I get the air from the bottom or right above the plunger to now is down on the other end, and I can kind of work that all out. So then I can come back in and fill my seam or crack in and let it soak down in or drain down in. In the syringes and in my cup, it's going to go off a little bit faster than what it will in the part or on the part. Okay, it was hard to see, but I did see a little bit of movement in my pieces of wood here, clamping it together with big bar clamp. I saw a little bit of epoxy squeeze up, and so I think that's going to be good for now. I'll let that dry. I might take my stir stick and level off my epoxy a little bit, but that will sand down pretty easily. And moved all the old paint and varnish and finishes to put a little bit of epoxy on the very bottom of it to seal it up so you don't get moisture intrusion. I just arbitrarily picked 3 inches up from the bottom, put a mark on both sides, stretch some masking tape across to give me a nice straight line to brush the epoxy onto. So I've mixed my epoxy up, just using a disposable chip brush. It's gonna soak in pretty quick for me. Wood's pretty dry. Then you're seeing me work on one side and the bottom. You do want to, once this is cured, flip it over and do the same thing on the other side of the door. So you seal up both surfaces. A lot of people just think, oh, I'll just seal up the outside and leave the inside alone. Well, you still need to seal the inside. It'll just help stabilize the wood down there and everything for you. Because I'll still have to come back and sand this surface before I paint it or prime it. So the reason we're coating out the bottom of the door down here is this takes all the abuse from rainwater, there's rush in the house, what have you. Takes all that abuse being the exterior side of the door. We want to seal up the wood so you don't get any soft or punky wood going on. There's the wood being as old as this door is, there's a little bit of soft stuff on the very bottom. So that's why we're consolidating it by putting a little bit of epoxy on it and stiffening it up. As you can see, the wood darkens up a little bit as you coat it out with the epoxy. If you're really wondering what the surface is going to look like before you put epoxy on it, you can just take a nice clean spot and take a damp rag with just water on it and wipe the surface. That'll also show you the color you're going to have. Alrighty, well, that's got everything coated out and sealed up, I think. I might come back in, I'll do a little bit of filling here and there to fill in the old nail screw holes, chips, so forth, so I have a nice smooth surface when I'm all said and done. The tape that's on here, seeing how this is just our standard household masking tape. Once the epoxy starts to soak in a little bit into the wood, that is, you want to pull the tape because the epoxy will bond the masking tape to the wood surface. If you want to do it before it gets too sticky or tacky, probably 15 minutes or so after you've coated it, be a good time to pull it. As you can see with masking tape, I'm getting a little bit of print through, or they're soaked through as the epoxy soaking through the masking tape, which I'm okay with because I will have to do a light sand on this before I do any primer or anything, so I'll be able to blend that in just fine. Okay, so I just mixed some of my 410 in here to make my peanut butter close to it type consistency, filling of nail holes and dents. I just used my excess that I used for just coating out the door. If there's a little bit on the surface, so be it. Like I said, we're gonna sand and prime it, so we'll be able to sand it nice and smooth. And I think that's gonna take care of it. And I'll be able to come back tomorrow and do a light sand on it, and then we'll be able to prime it. Okay, so we've done our coating where we just did unthickened epoxy on the surface, and then let that set for a little bit. Then that same mixture, I added 410 in to fill our divots. Seeing how the 410 is pretty easy to sand, I've kind of left them a little high or a little proud. So I have to come back in here now and sand the surface to smooth it out, to get it ready for priming and painting. One thing to note on here is the center panel, the grain is across the door, and then the end is vertically or up the door. So you need to make sure you change directions when you work onto the wood, so you don't put any strange scratches or scratching into the wood surfaces. The epoxy doesn't care so much, the wood does. Okay, so I'm pretty close here on my sanding. Now, one thing I will mention, I'm using just a sanding block because it sands pretty easily in that with the 410 Microlight in it. You could use a palm sander, quarter sheet sander, small DA to do the same thing if you'd like. We'll probably do that when we get into doing the rest of the door. I won't hand sand the whole thing, but you can use a power sander to make life a little bit simpler and easier. Yeah. I think that's kind of got it. All right, so now that we've sanded, scraped, and cleaned the rest of the door up, vacuumed it off, wiped it down, to get all the dust and debris off, we're going to get into doing a primer on the surface. It's just a normal primer you can pick up at a big hardware store, and we're just going to use that to prime the wood and right over the epoxy. Now there may be a little bit of a difference when it cures or dries from the wood surface, because that's still going to be porous, to the epoxy surface that is going to be a hard surface. It's kind of like a pseudo-plastic surface when you're all said and done. So there might be a little bit of a difference that you'll see when it dries or starts to cure out. So as I'm rolling the primer on here, you're definitely seeing a color difference. But there again, it's because the wood is a porous surface and the primer is soaking into that easier than the area we put epoxy onto. So there's a little bit of a difference, so it'll definitely take a couple coats to get everything covered and sealed up. And this is the time you'll also find out all the lovely little pinholes and so forth that you've missed. Okay, so now that we have the door primed, I've primed the whole door, and as you can see that it does cover over the epoxy. It's a little bit different look from the epoxy surface to the door surface, because once again the door is a little more porous than what the epoxy is, so there's a little bit of difference seen in the primer. When you go to sand this for top coat paint, that'll all blend in and be one continuous color.